The home theater experience is about to change, and Sony thinks that they might have cracked the code. This year, they're not just launching new TVs, they're completely rethinking how TVs create color with something called True RGB technology. And honestly, after seeing this in person in New York, I walked away thinking, okay, this might actually be a really big deal. And alongside the new TVs, they also announced the new Bravia Theater Trio, which might finally solve one of the biggest problems with modern TVs, where you get amazing picture, but terrible sound. So in today's video, we're breaking all of this down in plain English. No confusing display scientist energy, just what actually matters for your living room. So grab a snack, sit back, and let's talk about why Sony may have just changed home theater. Look, if you've been following digital trends for a while, then you know that we absolutely love good technology that makes everyday life better. And TVs are one of those things where even if you're not a tech nerd, you immediately notice when something looks incredible. A couple months back, Sony invited me out to New York to get a first look at their brand new Bravia lineup, and I got to spend time with something they're calling True RGB. And before you think, cool, another TV buzzword, trust me, I thought the exact thing, but once they explained what they were actually doing, things got very interesting. Let me ask you something. How many of you actually watch TV in a perfectly dark room, like with no sunlight, no lamps, no reflections, no distractions? Basically a movie theater. Probably not many. And you see, Sony knows this, and they actually shared something fascinating with me, that only about 13% of people are watching TV in that ideal perfect environment, which means that 87% of us are watching TV in real world conditions, which means bright living rooms with afternoon sunlight, open floor plans, kids running around, and kitchen lights on. Basically, chaos. And this matters because most premium TVs are optimized for ideal viewing conditions, not real life. That's why sometimes your TV looks amazing at night, but during the day when you're watching something, you suddenly feel like everything looks a little washed out. And Sony believes that they finally found a way to solve that. And that is where True RGB comes in. Now, don't worry, I'm not about to turn this into a science class. I'll explain everything in normal human language. You see, most premium TVs today, whether it's mini LED or QLED, typically start with a blue or white light source. Then the TV filters and processes that light to create colors, kind of like adding ingredients after the fact. So basically, Sony said, what if we just skipped all of that? So instead of starting with one light source and filtering color afterward, what if we created the exact color we wanted from the very beginning? So with True RGB, Sony is using independently controlled red, green, and blue diodes directly in the backlight itself, meaning that the TV is creating cleaner, more precise colors right at the source, before the image even reaches the LCD layer. The results are immediately noticeable. And after seeing side-by-side comparisons, I'll be honest, I get the hype. So what exactly changes when you're sitting on your couch watching something? Three major things. The first thing is that colors look ridiculously good. And this was something that I noticed right away. Everything looked richer, more vibrant, but somehow still natural. You know how some TVs crank colors to the point where everyone looks radioactive? Yeah, well, this wasn't that. Sony says that compared to the original Bravia 9 Mini LED, this new True RGB setup delivers about 2 times larger color volume, and compared to something like the Bravia 8 OLED, they're claiming up to 4 times larger color volume. This means bright scenes stay colorful instead of getting washed out, so everything looks richer without looking fake. The second thing is that viewing angles are way better. This matters more than people actually realize because not everyone sits dead center in front of the TV. Usually, TVs start looking weird from off angles. Colors shift, contrast drops, things lose their magic. But because Sony is creating colors through both the backlight and LCD layer, colors looked much more consistent from the side, meaning that everyone gets a great seat. And now the third thing is smoother images. Sony's new processing plus independent RGB control make gradients look buttery smooth. Everything looks cleaner, more premium, more cinematic. Every TV conversation on the internet that I read becomes a civil war. You're either team OLED or team mini LEDs. And honestly, both technologies are incredible. OLED gives you those ridiculously deep blacks and cinematic contrast, but sometimes does struggle in real bright rooms. And mini LED gets crazy bright, but sometimes you're compromising when it comes to viewing angles or black levels. So Sony is basically trying to combine the best parts of both. You get OLED style viewing angles and contrast with mini LED brightness. My first impressions is that it's very promising. Now let's talk about the TVs themselves. At the very top, you've got the Bravia 9.2, and this is a monster. This is the flagship. It's the TV that basically walks into the room and says, yeah, I'm expensive, but worth it. This thing comes in 65, 75, 85, and an absolutely ridiculous 115-inch version. Sony says that this model is engineered to closely match their professional mastering monitors, the same kinds of displays used by filmmakers and studios. Then you've got the Bravia 7.2, which honestly might be the sweet spot for a lot of people because it brings true RGB to a more accessible tier, and it ranges from 50 inches all the way to 98 inches. And if you're still loyal to OLED, Sony also announced the Bravia 8.2 plus the standard Bravia 8. So there are literally options for every type of person. But here's the thing, modern TVs have one huge problem. The picture gets better every single year, but somehow audio still sounds like it's coming from an iPhone speaker in another room. Sony knows this, which is why they also launched something that honestly caught my attention. The Sony Bravia Theater Trio. People don't want speaker cables running throughout the house or giant speakers everywhere, so this Trio is Sony's new premium home theater lineup made up of 3 different speakers, a tiny central channel soundbar, and 2 left and right channels. Also, Sony says that its 360 spatial sound mapping technology can also generate up to 24 virtual speakers to simulate a larger surround sound field throughout the room. So here's my takeaway. Sony isn't just making brighter TVs, they're trying to rethink how TVs actually create color. And after seeing True RGB in person, this genuinely feels different. Sony will be sending me one of these flagship TVs very soon, and when it lands in my studio, you already know we're doing the full deep dive review. So if you're into home theater setups or just love premium technology, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications because you do not want to miss this review. If this video helped you out, smash that like button, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.